Emily Turner was 35 years old, though most days she felt older. She lived in a small rented house outside Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't a bad neighborhood, just tired. The paint on the porches peeled. The sidewalks cracked. Lawns were cut, but without much pride. It was the kind of place where people worked hard and worried quietly. Emily had 2 children. Noah was 8, thoughtful and shy. Lily was 5, full of questions and energy. They were good kids. Polite. Loving. They didn't ask for much, and that sometimes broke her heart the most. Her husband, Mark, was 45. When she met him, he was steady and confident. He worked construction back then and carried himself like a man who knew how to build things, houses, plans, a future. He made her laugh. He told her she was safe with him. But time changes people. After a back injury forced him off the job years ago, something inside him shifted. He tried other work, but nothing stuck. Slowly, frustration turned into drinking. Drinking turned into late nights. Late nights turned into habits Emily didn't want to think too hard about. Money was always tight. Emily worked full-time as an administrative assistant at a regional logistics company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. She answered phones, organized schedules, kept files in order, and made sure things ran smoothly. Her paycheck covered groceries, school clothes, utilities, when she could stretch it far enough. Mark said he was looking for something better. But most days, he was gone. Or asleep. Or irritated. When Emily tried to talk about bills, he waved her off. "You worry too much," he would say. But someone had to worry. Every morning, Emily woke up at 5:30 a.m. She packed lunches, started laundry, made coffee. She woke the kids gently, brushed Lily's hair, reminded Noah about homework. She drove them to school before heading to work herself. She rarely sat down. At the office, she was known as dependable. If something needed fixing, it went to Emily. If someone forgot a deadline, Emily caught it. She didn't complain. She didn't gossip. She simply worked. Her boss, David Harper, had noticed that about her. David was 52. Widowed. Calm. Thoughtful. He had kind eyes and a quiet way of speaking that made people feel heard. He ran the office with fairness and patience. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He paid attention. One afternoon, about 6 months before the trip, he asked Emily to stay after a staff meeting. "Everything okay at home?" he asked gently. The question caught her off guard. She forced a small smile. "Yes, sir." "Why do you ask?" "You look tired," he said. More than usual. It wasn't the kind of question people usually asked her. Not really. For a moment, she almost brushed it aside. But something in his voice felt sincere. Not curious. Not nosy. Just concerned. "It's just life," she said quietly. He nodded. "If you ever need flexibility, let me know. You're one of the best employees I've ever had." Those words stayed with her longer than they should have. At home, she didn't hear praise. She heard complaints. Or silence. Over the next few months, David checked in occasionally. Nothing improper. Just small kindnesses. "Did your daughter's school play go well? Are you managing okay with the overtime this week? Don't forget to take your lunch." Simple things. But for Emily, they felt like sunlight in a dim room. Meanwhile, Mark grew more distant. Some evenings, he didn't come home until after midnight. Other nights, he came home smelling like cheap liquor and irritation. One night, when she asked where he had been, he snapped. "You think I like feeling useless?" he shouted. "You think I don't know you're the one keeping this place running?" She hadn't meant to accuse him. She just wanted honesty. But honesty was hard to find. Later, lying awake beside him while he snored heavily, she stared at the ceiling and wondered how things had drifted so far. She didn't want another man. She didn't want excitement. She wanted peace. At work, a new opportunity came up. The company was expanding into another state, Indiana. There would be a week of meetings, planning sessions, and strategy reviews. David mentioned he would need someone organized and trustworthy to assist. "Would you be willing to travel for a week?" he asked her one afternoon. Her heart skipped. A week away felt impossible. The kids. The house. Mark. "I'd have to arrange things," she said carefully. "There would be a stipend," he added gently. "And your own furnished apartment for the week. Nothing fancy. Just convenient." She went home that evening with the idea circling in her mind. When she mentioned the trip to Mark, she kept it simple. "It's just work," she said. "A week of meetings." He barely looked up from the television. "Do what you want," he muttered. That hurt more than if he had argued. In the days leading up to the trip, she packed carefully. Practical clothes. Comfortable shoes. A small framed photo of the kids. The morning she left, Noah hugged her tightly. "Don't be gone too long," he whispered. "I won't," she promised. As the plane lifted off the runway, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in years. Space. Not freedom exactly, but room to breathe. She didn't know that this week would test her heart in ways she wasn't prepared for. She didn't know that kindness, when you're starved for it, can start to feel like something much deeper. And she certainly didn't know that by the end of the week, she would be standing at a crossroads she never thought she'd face. But that was still ahead. For now, she simply watched the clouds pass beneath the airplane window and wondered who she might be, if just for a little while, outside the weight of her own life. The apartment in Indianapolis was simple but comfortable. It sat on the third floor of a clean brick building near downtown. There was a small balcony, a tidy kitchen, neutral furniture, and large windows that let in soft afternoon light. Nothing luxurious. Nothing flashy. Just calm. For Emily, it felt like stepping into someone else's life. No toys scattered across the floor. No unpaid bills stacked on the counter. No tension hanging in the air. Just quiet. The first 2 days were busy with meetings. The company was opening a new distribution branch, and there were presentations, site visits, and long planning sessions. Emily took notes, organized schedules, and handled last-minute changes with her usual steady focus. David worked beside her, professional as always. In meetings, he was confident and clear. Outside of them, he remained respectful and measured. That's what made everything feel safe. Each evening, after work wrapped up, they would return to the building. His apartment was on the second floor. Hers was above. They would exchange polite goodnights in the hallway. "See you at 8, he'd say. "8 is perfect," she'd reply. On the third evening, after a long strategy session ran late, David paused near the elevators. "There's a small diner across the street," he said. "Nothing fancy. But they make a decent pot roast. Would you like dinner?" "Strictly business conversation, I promise." Emily hesitated for only a moment. Dinner wasn't inappropriate. It was practical. They were working long hours together. And truthfully, she didn't feel like eating alone again. "That sounds nice," she said. The diner had red vinyl booths and soft country music playing in the background. The waitress called everyone hun. The place smelled like coffee and gravy. It reminded Emily of Sunday afternoons when she was a little girl, sitting with her grandparents after church. They talked about work at first. Timelines. Staffing. Budget concerns. But somewhere between the salad and the main course, the conversation shifted. "Do you ever regret not choosing something different?" David asked quietly. She looked up. "Different how?" "A different path. A different life." She gave a small, thoughtful smile. I don't think life gives us neat choices like that. He nodded slowly. No. It doesn't. There was no flirting. No bold statements. Just two adults sharing space and conversation. But something felt open. After dinner, they walked back across the street. The night air was cool. Streetlights cast soft shadows on the pavement. Thank you, she said. It was nice not to eat microwaved leftovers. He smiled. Everyone deserves a hot meal now and then. Back in her apartment, Emily stood by the window for a long time. She missed her children. She always did. She had called them earlier, listened to Lily chatter about school and Noah explain a math test. Mark had barely spoken on the phone. Everything's fine here, he'd said flatly. But something wasn't fine. She knew it. She always knew it. The next evening, the meetings ended earlier than expected. Around 6 p.m., David knocked lightly on her door. I hope I'm not disturbing you, he said when she opened it. No, not at all. I ordered takeout, he explained. Too much, honestly. I thought perhaps you might help me with it. She hesitated, but only briefly. It felt harmless. Safe. Like two co-workers sharing dinner after a long day. He brought over containers of grilled chicken, vegetables, and warm bread. They sat at the small dining table. The television remained off. The atmosphere was peaceful. At one point, she laughed, really laughed, at something he said about a disastrous company retreat years ago. The sound surprised her. I haven't heard you laugh like that, he said softly. She looked down at her hands. I guess I don't do it much anymore. There it was again. That gentle look in his eyes. Not pity. Not desire. Concern. Emily, he said carefully, forgive me if I'm overstepping, but you carry more than you should. Her throat tightened. She hadn't meant to talk about her marriage. But words sometimes spill out when someone listens without judgment. Mark isn't a bad man, she said quietly. He just lost his way. David didn't interrupt. I don't expect fairy tales, she continued. I just wish I didn't feel so alone. The room grew still. He leaned back slightly, giving her space. No one should feel alone inside their own home. The words settled heavily between them. Later that night, after he returned downstairs, Emily lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling. This wasn't about romance. It wasn't even about attraction, not yet. It was about being seen. The next afternoon, heavy rain cancelled an outdoor site visit. The schedule cleared unexpectedly. For the first time all week, there was nowhere they needed to be. They sat in her apartment's small living room, coffee cups in hand, rain tapping against the windows. I've been meaning to say something, David began. Her heart skipped, though she didn't know why. He looked nervous for the first time since she'd known him. This week, he said slowly, has meant more to me than I expected. She stayed quiet. You're strong, Emily. Stronger than you realize. And kind. And patient. Her pulse quickened. I admire you, he continued. Not just as an employee. As a person. The air shifted. She could feel it. This may not be appropriate, he said carefully, and if it makes you uncomfortable, I'll stop immediately. Her breath caught in her chest. I care about you, he said. More than I should. The words landed softly, but their weight was undeniable. Emily's hands trembled slightly. She hadn't prepared for this moment. She stood up and walked toward the window, needing space to think. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was a work trip. A break from stress. A professional opportunity. But her heart was reacting in ways she couldn't ignore. Behind her, he didn't move closer. He didn't touch her. He simply waited. And in that quiet apartment, with rain falling gently outside, Emily realized she was standing at the edge of something she hadn't allowed herself to imagine. The rain kept falling. It was steady now, not loud, just constant. The kind of rain that makes the world feel smaller and more private. Emily stood by the window, her back to David. Her heart was beating faster than she liked. "I didn't expect that," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. His voice was calm, but she could hear the strain beneath it. "I didn't plan to say anything. I told myself I wouldn't." She turned slowly to face him. "Then why did you?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because pretending I don't feel something started to feel dishonest." The room felt warmer suddenly. Emily folded her arms across her chest, not in defense, but in uncertainty. "This can't happen," she said. "I'm married." "I know. I have children." "I know that too." There was no anger in his voice. No argument. Just acknowledgement. "That doesn't make what I feel disappear," he said gently. She swallowed hard. For years, she had felt invisible at home. Necessary, yes. Responsible, absolutely. But seen? Appreciated? No. And now here was a man looking at her as if she mattered. That was the dangerous part. "It's just this week," she said softly, almost to herself. "This isn't real life." David shook his head slightly. "Sometimes the quiet moments are more real than the loud ones." She let out a slow breath. "I didn't come here looking for anything." "I know. I don't want to hurt anyone." "Neither do I." Silence filled the room again. He stood up slowly, giving her space. "I'm not asking for promises," he said. "I'm not asking you to leave your life. I just needed you to know how I feel." Her heart tightened. Because the truth was, she had felt something too. Not sudden passion. Not reckless desire. But warmth. Relief. A softness she hadn't known she was missing. She stepped closer, though not close enough to touch him. "This scares me," she admitted. "It scares me too." She studied his face. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't demanding. He looked like a man who had finally said something he'd been holding inside for a long time. "I care about you," she said finally. The words left her mouth before she could stop them. His eyes shifted slightly, hope, but careful hope. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she added quickly. "But I feel it." The rain softened outside. They stood there in that small apartment, the weight of reality pressing in. "I don't want to make you someone you're not," he said. "You're not," she whispered. "You're just seeing me." Her voice cracked on the last word. That was the moment everything changed. Not because they crossed a physical line, but because they crossed an emotional one. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand was warm and steady. Not urgent. Not demanding. Just there. For a long time, they stood like that, hands joined, neither speaking. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't reckless. It was quiet. "I don't know what happens after this week," she said softly. "Neither do I. But right now, I don't want to pretend this isn't real." He nodded. "I don't either." Later that evening, they sat on the couch, closer now but still careful. They talked about ordinary things, childhood memories, favorite books, places they had always wanted to visit. She told him about growing up in Kentucky, about her grandmother's cooking, about how she once wanted to be a schoolteacher. He told her about losing his wife to illness years ago, about the long silence that followed, about how he buried himself in work because it was easier than feeling alone. They weren't two reckless people chasing excitement. They were two adults who had both known disappointment. At one point, she leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. He didn't move. He just let her rest there. The clock ticked softly on the wall. For the first time in years, Emily felt calm in someone's presence. Eventually, the hour grew late. She stood up, heart heavy and light at the same time. "We should get some sleep," she said. "Yes," he agreed. At the door, he paused. "Emily." She looked at him. "I'm glad you're here." Her throat tightened again. "So am I." He didn't kiss her. He didn't try. He simply squeezed her hand once more and left. That night, lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling. Guilt brushed against her thoughts, not loud, but present. Mark hadn't called. He hadn't asked how she was. The kids had texted goodnight earlier with little heart emojis. Her heart ached for them. But it also ached for herself. The next morning, sunlight poured through the curtains. When she stepped into the hallway, David was there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might need this," he said with a small smile. She accepted it. "Thank you." There was something softer between them now. Unspoken, but understood. They didn't need big gestures. They just needed honesty. As they walked toward the elevator together, he said quietly, "Whatever happens after this week, I don't regret telling you." She looked at him carefully. "Neither do I." And as the elevator doors closed, Emily realized something she hadn't admitted yet. This wasn't just about being seen. It was about remembering who she used to be. And that memory was powerful. The rest of the week passed faster than Emily expected. Work filled the daylight hours, presentations, planning sessions, final decisions. She stayed focused, professional, organized. No one watching them would have guessed anything had shifted between her and David. But something had. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't reckless. It was quiet and certain. On their final evening in Indianapolis, the meetings ended early. The expansion plan had been approved. Contracts were signed. Everyone seemed satisfied. Back at the apartment building, the air felt heavier than before. Tomorrow, they would fly home. Tomorrow, real life would return. Emily stood on the small balcony outside her apartment, watching cars move slowly down the street below. The sky was painted in soft pink and orange, the kind of sunset that makes you pause without knowing why. A knock came at her door. She didn't need to check who it was. David stepped inside when she opened it. He looked thoughtful, not rushed. "Last night here," he said gently. "Yes." They sat across from each other at the small dining table. No takeout tonight. No distractions. Just conversation. "I've been thinking," he began. "That's usually dangerous," she said softly, trying to lighten the mood. He smiled, but it faded quickly. "I don't want to be something you regret." The word sat between them. "You're not," she said immediately. "Emily," he said carefully, "you have a life waiting for you back home. Children who need you. A husband who..." She looked down. "A husband who hasn't needed me in a long time," she finished quietly. He didn't argue. "I'm not asking you to make decisions tonight," he said. "Or tomorrow. I just need you to know that what I feel doesn't disappear when we get on that plane." Her chest tightened. She walked over and sat beside him instead of across from him. "I don't know what my life is supposed to look like anymore," she admitted. "I only know that I don't want to feel invisible for the rest of it." He turned toward her. "You deserve more than survival." The sentence hit her harder than she expected. Deserve. It was a word she hadn't thought about in years. They talked long into the evening, not about secret plans or dramatic changes, but about honesty. About responsibility. About what love actually means after youth fades and reality settles in. At one point, she reached for his hand. "I'm scared," she said. "So am I." He looked at her, really looked at her. "I love you," he said quietly. The words were simple. No grand speech. No pressure. Just truth. Her breath caught. She searched her own heart, and what she found surprised her with its clarity. I love you too, she whispered. He leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her hand. Not rushed. Not demanding. Just tender. They didn't need more than that. That night, they didn't pretend the world didn't exist. They talked about it. About how complicated life is. About how people grow apart slowly, not all at once. About how loneliness inside a marriage can feel louder than being single. They didn't decide anything. They simply acknowledged what had grown between them. The next morning came too quickly. Suitcases packed. Keys left on the counter. Lights turned off. At the airport, everything felt strangely normal. Travelers moved in lines. Announcements echoed overhead. Coffee machines hissed. But for Emily, nothing felt ordinary. On the plane, they sat side by side. Not touching. But aware. When the plane began its descent back into Ohio, her stomach tightened. She pictured Noah's shy smile. Lily's small arms around her neck. She pictured Mark sitting in the living room, television on, expression unreadable. Whatever you decide, David said quietly beside her, make sure it's for you. Not for guilt. Not for fear. She nodded. I will. When the plane landed, reality rushed in like cold air. They walked through the terminal together, but slower now. At baggage claim, he turned to her. I won't push, he said. You know how to reach me. She looked up at him. Thank you for seeing me. He smiled softly. That wasn't hard. Her suitcase rolled toward her. She grabbed it, heart heavy but steady. As she walked toward the exit doors, she felt something new. Not excitement. Not panic. Clarity. She didn't yet know what she would do about her marriage. She didn't know what conversations waited at home. But she knew one thing with certainty. She could no longer pretend she was satisfied with surviving. Outside the airport, the familiar Ohio air wrapped around her. Mark's truck was parked near the curb. He stepped out when he saw her. You're back, he said flatly. Yes. He grabbed her suitcase without much emotion. How was the meeting? Productive, she replied. He nodded once and walked toward the truck. As she followed him, she realized something important. The week hadn't just been about falling in love. It had been about remembering her own worth. And once a person remembers that, it's very hard to forget. The drive home from the airport was quiet. Mark kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting near the gear shift. The radio played softly in the background, some old country song about lost chances and second tries. Emily watched the houses pass by. Same streets. Same cracked sidewalks. Same tired lawns. But she didn't feel the same. When they pulled into the driveway, Noah and Lily burst out the front door. Mom! Lily shouted, running straight into her arms. Noah followed, trying to act older than he was but hugging her just as tightly. Emily knelt down and held them close. She breathed in the familiar scent of home, laundry detergent, grass, the faint smell of crayons. I missed you, she whispered. We missed you too, Noah said. Inside the house, nothing had changed. A few dishes in the sink. Shoes by the door. The television remote on the couch. But Emily had changed. That night, after the kids were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table with Mark. He opened a beer. She folded her hands in front of her. We need to talk, she said calmly. He looked at her, slightly annoyed. About what? About us. He let out a slow breath, like he'd heard this before. I'm tired, Emily. So am I. That made him pause. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse him. She just spoke honestly. I can't keep living like this, she said. I feel alone in this marriage. He looked away. I didn't plan for things to turn out like this, he muttered. Neither did I. The room felt heavy, but steady. I don't expect perfection, she continued. I expect partnership. He stayed quiet. For a long moment, she wondered if he would shrug it off again. But something in her voice must have sounded different. What are you saying? He asked finally. I'm saying I deserve more than survival. And so do you. He rubbed his face with both hands. I know I haven't been present, he admitted. After the injury, I felt useless. She listened. I started drinking because it shut everything off for a while, he continued quietly. It was the first honest thing he had said in years. Emily's heart softened, but it didn't lose its strength. I can't fix you, she said gently. You have to want to fix yourself. Silence settled between them. I don't want to lose my family, he said after a while. Then don't. The words were simple. But they meant work. The next few weeks were not magical. There were no dramatic transformations. But there were small changes. Mark agreed to see a counselor. He cut back on drinking. Not perfectly, but honestly. He started helping with school drop-offs twice a week. He looked for part-time work again. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fast. But it was effort. During that time, Emily spoke to David only once. She called him on a quiet Sunday afternoon while the kids were outside playing. I wanted to be honest, she said. I figured you would, he replied softly. I'm choosing to try and rebuild my marriage. There was no anger in his voice. Just understanding. I respect that, he said. I meant what I said, she added. About how I feel. I know. And I'm grateful for this week. For what it reminded me of. There was a long pause. You reminded yourself, he corrected gently. She smiled through tears. Maybe. I want you to be happy, he said. However that looks. They didn't say goodbye dramatically. They didn't make promises. They simply accepted that sometimes love arrives not to replace your life, but to wake you up inside it. Months passed. Life wasn't perfect. But it was more honest. Mark still struggled some days. Recovery isn't a straight line. But he showed up more often. He listened more. He tried. Emily kept working. She stood a little taller at the office. She set clearer boundaries. She didn't carry everything alone anymore. One evening, as she sat on the porch watching the kids ride their bikes, Mark came outside and sat beside her. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what? For not seeing you. The words mattered. Because they were true. She looked at him carefully. I'm still here, she said. I know. And for the first time in years, she felt like maybe he meant it. Love isn't always about fireworks. Sometimes it's about rebuilding something cracked but not completely broken. Emily would always remember that week in Indianapolis. Not as an escape. Not as a mistake. But as the moment she remembered her worth. And once a woman remembers that, everything changes.